So today in this video I will show you how you can create an SQL database inside your application, which later you're going to fetch and get the usage counters. So the idea of our database would be to record basically two types of information, and those are the browser ID, which is going to be unique to every user that accesses your application. You get that from the browser of the user, and then the usage counter, or how many times this particular user connected with your application. That way you will be able to identify unique users and count how many times they access the application. If they access the application, let's say more than 10 times, your application should know about it. We'll add an if statement in your main page. So the idea is that your application will not allow the user to access your application anymore before paying for it. So let's see how this is done in practice. So let's open PyCharm, and I will open the code bug fixing app that we already created. Let's now try the application just to make sure that everything works fine. Okay, so you can see that your application works completely fine. And then let's close it. Now I will not add anything into our code bug fixer data project, which is our cloud version of the project, simply because in data you cannot have databases since you cannot write into them. Or at least this is not included in the free plan. However, if you want to move forward to a different plan, you can definitely add databases that you can read and write from them, which is exactly what we will be doing today. So the first thing that you need to do is to go to your main.py file, and inside it you need to import some additional libraries. So firstly, I will import the hash library, which is pretty much a module that imports common interface for message digest algorithms. Then I will also import SQLite 3, and this is something, so you can see that both of those are part of the Python basic functions, so you don't need to install them. And then I will import Stripe, okay, and you will need to install Stripe in your application. Okay, so now you have all libraries you need in order to continue and build the database. So here under my API token, I will add the database, and this will be our initialization function. So the idea is that you first define the functions and then you call them later on in your index application. So the first function, I will do def initialize database, and then I will do con for connection, okay, and then I will initialize the SQLite. So I will do SQLite3 dot connect, and we will create a file called app.db. So app.db will be your database, and it will be automatically created if it is not created yet inside your project. So once you initialize your database, let's do c would be equal to connect.cursor, and the cursor is pretty much what executes the database calls. So the idea is that if the table doesn't exist, we will create it. So I will do c.execute, and I will do the following. I will do create table if not exists users. So if there are no users, we will create a table, and here in the brackets I will write fingerprint text primary key. So the primary key will be our fingerprint text, which will be assigned to the users, and then usage counter int for integer. Okay, so this is the complete command. After that, let's start the connection. So let's do connection dot commit and then connection dot close. So the idea here is that when we initialize the database, we will check if we have database in place. If not, we will create one, we will commit the changes to the database. Okay, so we'll create it, and then we will close the connection with the database. This is the whole idea of the init function. Then let's create a second function which will be called get fingerprint. The idea of this function will be to get your browser fingerprint and return it, so we add it in the database. Let's do that. So let's do df get fingerprint, okay, and this function will take no arguments. So let's initialize the browser. Okay, browser will be equal to request dot user agent dot browser. Okay, so now we have access to the browser with which the user access our application. After that, let's create version will be equal to request dot user agent dot version and float request dot user agent dot version dot split, and then I'll add 0 here. So we're gonna take the first element. So now we have the browser, we have the version of the browser, and then we will need the platform. So let's do platform equals to request dot user agent dot platform. Okay, so now once you have the browser, the version, and the platform, you can generate a unique fingerprint for your browser. And we can do that by simply placing those elements one by another. So let's do string equals to f. Okay, now what here? The browser, the version, and then the platform. Okay. And finally, let's do fingerprint. Okay, so now once you have the string, you can create a fingerprint with the hash library. So we're gonna encode that. Let's do now hashlib dot sha256 string dot encode, and we use utf-8 to do that. Okay, and then dot hex digest. So even if this sounds complicated for you guys, it's actually pretty simple. What we simply do is that we're getting the browser code, the version, and the platform. We put them side by side, and then we encode that in a hex form. So you will get some very long ID. This is the whole idea. And this ID is supposed to be unique for every browser. That way we can ensure that we can really distinguish between the different users. Then let's do print, fingerprint, okay? And then I will return the fingerprint. So I think that's enough for today, guys. Now what you have here is an initialize database function, a function to get the fingerprint of your browser, and in the next video we'll create the logic behind on how to get your usage counter and how to update it. So if this sounds a little bit complex for you, don't worry, everything will make sense in the next video when we create the other two functions, and I will also update the index function. So we'll use those functions that we are creating to improve the logic when accessing the OpenAI API. Thanks for watching.